I'm going to be introducing the event today along with the speakers. So for those who are new to this space, firstly, Friends of Elephants is not an organization and neither does it propose to become one. It is an informal group of people coming together with varied expertise concerned about elephants and other wildlife. The group is a forum for disseminating knowledge linked to elephants and other wildlife science, conservation, and welfare through art, culture, literature, movies, talks, and panel discussions. We have been conducting these events as offline events since April 2014 and from 2020 as online events. Our expectation is that people who have attended our events, formally or informally, participate or help in developing appropriate conservation and welfare measures for wildlife, including elephants. So we have a very interesting session today, and here's the schedule. Firstly will be my introduction, a very brief one, and then we have a talk on the tourism elephants in Nepal, their challenges and their connection to the conservation of wild elephants by Dr. Szydlowski. This will be followed by a conversation on how we can improve the health and welfare of captive elephants in tourism and how improving their health impacts wild elephants. Ms. Floriane Blot in conversation with Dr. Szydlowski. Followed by this, we will have a final segment on Q&A, which will be moderated by Mr. Sanjay Ajanikar. Just a very brief introduction about me. I'm Dr. Chaitanya Sridhar, and I will be introducing the panelists today. I'm a sports psychologist with a PhD from Australia. My training in Jungian depth psychology has aided in bridging my passion to aid elephant welfare. I have been involved with captive elephant rehabilitation for over 5 years now. Along with like-minded people, our group ANE, which in Kannada means elephant, was formed to champion elephant welfare, especially the Elephant Mahout unit. I'm truly delighted to introduce this event to all of you today. So firstly, please mute your audio so that we don't have any hitches in the presentation. And please put in your questions, which will be taken in the final segment. The talk is on tourism elephants in Nepal, their challenges, and their connection to the conservation of wild elephants by Dr. Michelle. A brief profile of Dr. Michelle. Dr. Michelle Szydlowski is a college professor and elephant researcher from the United States of America. She is an anthrozoology instructor, concentrates on cross-cultural anthrozoology, biology, and behavior of companion animals, animal shelter management, and operations. She has been studying captive elephants in Nepal for a decade, with a focus on their health and welfare and that of their caregivers. Dr. Szydlowski also examines how health and welfare of captive individuals impacts wild pachyderms and conservation efforts. She is interested in how elephant-human relationships impact the health of both and how NGOs influence local and national policies and practices of elephant care. Over to you, Dr. Michelle.
Thank you so much. Give me 1 second here to share my screen.
Sure.
I'm on my very old computer, so I'm hoping this works well. All right, how does that look?
It looks good.
Okay, perfect. So yes, thank you for having me here today. Now I have to navigate how to get this little bar out of the way. There we go. Sorry, I'm unfamiliar with this computer. There we go. Minimize this. All right, so I just wanted to tell you a little bit about who I am and how I ended up in Nepal. And that is that I've been teaching for a very long time, teaching biology and veterinary medicine. And in about 2014, I decided to switch to social science And that became an interesting perspective because there's a lack in either biology and in social science at getting that whole picture of the health and welfare of especially wild animals. So by combining the two, I am able to get a better picture of what's happening in the lives of animals. Do not know why my screen is not. There we go. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background on Nepal for those of you that aren't familiar. It is sandwiched between the Tibetan region of China and India. It's considered one of the world's most diverse landscapes, has 118 different ecosystems, and it's a very small country. It only makes up about 0.1% of the global landmass, but it contains more than 3% of the world's plants and about 1% of the world's animals. So it's really important to global biodiversity conservation. Part of the reason that it hosts this large amount of biodiversity is because there's such a range of land elevation from just a few feet above sea level all the way up to Mount Everest. Another reason that it's such a biodiversity hotspot is because 24% of the nation has been set aside into protected areas. So if you take a look at the map that I have here on the screen, the green areas are the national parks. So those don't represent all of the protected areas. Those are just the largest sections that are set aside. One of the problems Nepal is having, though, is that only about 2% of these protected areas are actually connected habitat. So there's a lot of very fragmented and segmented areas, which doesn't allow for a lot of passage of animals in between. Another issue with conservation in Nepal is that while they've made a lot of progress at reducing poverty, they are still one of the least developed countries in the world, which means that conservation funding has to come from outside sources. So there's a lot of global influence in Nepal when it comes to conservation efforts. So then if Nepal is so important to conservation, why is there not more of a focus, especially from global conservationists, on elephant conservation in Nepal? Well, probably the most obvious reason is that there just are not very many elephants in Nepal. And so researchers like to go to places where they have a larger population to study. Nepal was thought to only have about 150 wild elephants, but Dr. Ram has just done a new study, and he thinks that there might be closer to 400 wild elephants in Nepal. And if you compare that to the wild elephants, say in India, who has 30,000, clearly researchers want to go to places where they can find larger populations. There's also a big difference in estimates of Nepal wild elephant numbers. And part of the reason for that is that these large and fragmented protected areas makes it really hard to track the 4 herds that live there. So there's a wide variety of estimates in how many elephants are left. Another reason that there's not more research in Nepal is that the population of wild elephants is considered a doomed population, meaning that they don't have enough individuals to rebound in any meaningful way. But it is important that we still conserve these elephants because they may be a hidden population of genetic material since they're so geographically and socially distant from other herds. But there is another population of elephants in Nepal that is equally important to conservation efforts, and those are the captive government and privately owned tourism elephants. Tourism has been promoted for years by the government of Nepal and tourism operators as absolutely vital to conservation in Nepal. About 7.5% of the global GDP comes from tourism, and about 60% of international tourists visit protected areas because they want to see wildlife, wild spaces, especially rhinos and elephants. There was a lot of early academic work that suggested that bringing in tourism was very important and beneficial to marginalized communities. However, newer research shows that there really are not too many benefits to marginalized communities from tourism. What tends to happen is that sorry, you can tell me if I'm talking too fast too. I know I tend to talk very quickly. Newer research shows that really there aren't too many benefits to tourism for marginalized communities, and the benefits that do exist typically go to people in the higher socioeconomic strata rather than to marginalized communities. All right, so then what does this push for increasing tourism in Nepal have to do with conserving wild elephants? Well, captive tourism elephants provide transport into the protected areas for these tourists. Captive elephants live with a variety of livestock and humans in human-dominated areas. About 23% of the captive individuals in Nepal carry tuberculosis. They carry elephant endotheliotropic herpes viruses, rabies, hoof and mouth disease, salmonella, etc. And they pass through these wild elephant habitats as they offer safaris to tourists. Captive elephants also use the same habitats and feeding areas as wild elephants and other wild pachyderms. And we are starting to see increasing fatalities among wild elephants and greater one-horned rhino, suspected TB and other diseases that were probably brought into the population from captive elephants. The presence of captive elephants may also be increasing the incident of human-elephant conflict in Nepal. So traditionally, breeding government elephants relies on the presence of wild bulls. So the females are housed near the protected areas. The wild bulls come into the captive stables and mate with the captive females, providing the next generation of government elephants. The problem is that these bulls are now getting bolder and bolder and entering private elephant stables. And the private elephant stables, as you'll see shortly, are located within villages or within towns, meaning that these wild bull elephants are now crossing through villages to get to female elephants in private stables. So we're creating more problems. Overall, there's 8 to 20 deaths per year, human deaths per year from elephant conflict in Nepal. So my work tends to lie at the intersections of conservation, health, and tourism. And so I decided to look at privately owned individuals as part of a larger study on elephant keeping in Nepal, because the privately held elephants appear to be in the worst physical and mental condition of any of the elephants in Nepal. So from this point on, I'll be discussing the privately owned elephants. And I just wanted to point that out because the government-owned elephants live in very different situations. They do live in more camp-like situations, and they do have more access to browse and grazing time. They have more access to fresher grass. So yeah, it's just a disclaimer. So there wasn't any metric in place that could fit the unique situation that happens in Nepal stables. So I created the checklist for management and resource-based impacts using global data. So I took all of the data from around the world, zoo elephants, camp elephants, and I combined that with the information from mahouts and veterinary staff, and a lot of indigenous knowledge to kind of come up with a list of what it is that elephants in Nepal need and how to make their lives a little better. The thing that made my work different was that I wanted to create something specific to Nepal, and I wanted to make sure that I included the academic knowledge, both the natural science and the social science, and I wanted to make sure that indigenous knowledge was also represented equally. So I started with assessing the health and welfare of elephants, captive elephants in Nepal. And while I know that health and welfare are inseparable, I separated them out here just for an ease of conversation, so it'd make it a little easier to talk about. So overall, there was a general consensus that the main health impactors for elephants were access to veterinary care, freedom of movement. They need a widely varied and seasonally changeable diet. They need to have both upright and recumbent sleep opportunities. They need relief from human-generated disruptions. They need high-quality food. Clearly, the 5 freedoms, freedom from pain, and of course, there's so much more here. And we're going to get more of this as we talk about the stables. And as far as welfare, we needed to make sure that they have some agency in their life. They need to be able to make choices in their activities. They need to have social interaction. tactile, visual, and olfactory interactions with other conspecifics. They need to feel safe. They need to have adequate shelter. They need to feel comfortable and be able to relax, and they need to have access to the forest or the jungle. So what I discovered is complex. The results of the health and welfare study were not encouraging, but many of the issues that the elephants in Nepal faced stem from the physical structure itself and the availability of resources. So rather than going with animal-based metric system, such as behavioral studies or fecal corticoid measurements, I decided that I would look at a resource-based metric, just because there's not a lot of access in Nepal to laboratory facilities, not a lot of access to people to perform these studies. And so it was easier to go with resource-based methods. Secondly, the owners of the elephants in Nepal are much more accepting of suggestions on simple and inexpensive changes to facilities, as opposed to taking part in large-scale studies, more invasive studies. So I opted to use resource-based metrics. I also found that elephant keeping in Nepal is very, very different than other nations in Southeast Asia. And there was this perspective among both researchers and locals that Nepal was just a small India and everything was done the same way. But that's completely wrong. There are a lot of big differences. So the key differences are that in Nepal, elephants are exceptionally expensive, up to 90 times the average income of a regular Nepali person, which means that only those in the very highest socioeconomic tiers can afford them. There are no mahout owners in Nepal. There's no street beggar elephants, no farm elephants, no temple elephants, no community elephants. They just don't exist. Most of the elephants in Nepal are housed alone in urban spaces. There aren't any camp-style settings for private elephants. They don't have a lot of physical contact with their conspecifics. And when they're not on safari, which means if they're off for the day, they're chained the entire day. And there's a new push toward hobble chaining juvenile elephants and hobble chaining females to keep them from being broken out by wild males. In addition, there's no requirements or standards or oversight for privately held elephants. There's no mahout manual to assist new mahouts in learning how to care for elephants. So a lot of differences between Nepal and other countries. The other difference is that compared to India, who has about 3,500 captive elephants, Nepal only has 37 privately held elephants in the Chitwan area, and about 30 privately held elephants in other parts of Nepal. So it's a very small population of elephants. Another thing that I quickly realized is that there are major differences in traditional and current mahout training, job satisfaction, and public perceptions, especially in Nepal. So there was a tendency to either romanticize mahouts in anthropological literature or to villainize them in welfare literature. So that created some conflicts. There were people believe that mahouts are these traditional keepers of elephant wisdom and caregivers, but then on the same conversation would refer to them as uneducated or drunkards. Most of the mahouts were disrespected and underpaid. They didn't have any job security. They work up to 17 hours a day for less than the lowest civil servant makes. So these community perceptions were creating problems. Another issue arises from the fact that experienced mahouts are leaving the business, and younger people are becoming mahouts, and many of them have no embodied knowledge or experience with elephants. So now that these traditional elephant keeping methods are not being passed down generationally, traditional knowledge is being replaced with more violent handling methods, more out of a desperation to keep the elephant in control and keep tourists safe, rather than any sort of elephant experience. And this is not something that's happening just in Nepal, it's happening throughout Southeast Asia. Another issue arises from the fact that because mahouts do not own their elephant, they don't have a lot of say overall in what happens. So they may know that their elephant needs something different, and not be able to provide that to their elephant because the owners are unfamiliar with elephant health and welfare. And rather than listening to the mahouts, they kind of ignore them. So, and then lastly, the mahouts are stuck in this weird situation where they have to keep the tourists safe and keep themselves safe. And yet when they do things to attempt to keep their elephants and their tourists safe, they're blamed and accused of being violent. And so it's a very confusing situation for the mahouts. So one of the goals of this study was to find a way to improve both mahout and elephant well-being and offer them both more social support. Close this. See, there we go. So now I just want to talk a little bit about the private stables in Nepal so you can compare them to what you've seen in other countries. So in Nepal, it's typically just a 4-post with a tin roof. The posts are very thin. The elephants are discouraged from leaning against the posts, lest they knock over the facility. As you can see, Sarah is doing her best here to knock over the post of her enclosure. A lot of them are located directly behind hotels or along busy roads, and they have to walk down the main streets of town to get to work. So they're walking on a lot of asphalt, sometimes up to 5 kilometers before they even start their tourist rides for the day. There's no heat dispersion because the shelters are so low, and there's no protection from the monsoon rains or from winter temperatures, especially in areas like Bardia where it can get quite cold. During my study, most of the facilities did not have any access to water on site. That has since been corrected in a lot of cases through another nonprofit. The elephants are not provided with anywhere to lean or rest and don't have the ability to lay down for recumbent sleep, which is vitally important to all land-based mammals. These elephants also don't have any agency in their movement. They can't choose when and where they eat. They can't choose when they're interacting with humans. They can't break off contact from mahouts or tourists, which really impacts their well-being. They're not allowed to browse during safari, which is the only time that most of them have access to the national park or to the community forests. And they eat 90% provision food, which means it's brought in by humans rather than being things that they would seek out naturally. One of the key issues in Nepal is that rice is one of the largest food sources for elephants. Rice is not a natural elephant food. There is a perception in Nepal that rice is very healthy and nutritious. And so it's been given to elephants for years. However, it does make them feel full. It's very easy to store. It lasts a long time, but it just doesn't meet their nutritional needs. Another issue in Nepal is the misuse of chains and ropes. So chains and ropes can be great tools to keep elephants and humans safe. And unfortunately, what happens in Nepal is that the chains are about 4 feet long. If the elephant's not on safari, they're chained all the time on substrates like you see here, hard dirt mounds, which are very hard on joints. They don't have the ability to move around at will, and standing in one place means that they're standing in their feces and urine up to 24 hours a day. So all of this, of course, ups the risk for bacterial infections, progressive joint issues, all sorts of ongoing chronic problems. And foot problems are one of the biggest issues in Nepal. When you chain an elephant on a very short chain front and back, that elephant is incapable of laying down. So we're back to our sleep issue that some of these elephants in Nepal have not laid down for sleep in years and years and years, which affects their mental health and their physical health greatly. All right, so during COVID, a lot of the elephants looked better. They gained weight, they had fewer wounds from not wearing the tourist saddle, but they had a lot more foot and joint issues because they were chained in place 24 hours a day, just because they were unable to leave the stable due to lockdowns. And that brings us to probably the biggest issue facing the elephants in Nepal is this inappropriate substrate. There's a lot of a lack of education among owners in Nepal on what makes appropriate substrate. It needs to be something that's easy for mahouts to clean, but what happens is they don't want the elephants to dig and make a big mess. And so instead they put down concrete, like you see here, or hard packed dirt inside concrete berms. So this is one of the reasons that foot issues are rampant in Nepal. And then just a few more examples of shelters for you. So the few elephants that are housed with conspecifics are chained far enough apart so they can't have any physical contact because they don't want them to cause any problems. So they're kept apart. Which brings me to what are we going to do about this then? So the elephant owners are open to making small, inexpensive changes, except that they would like these small, inexpensive changes to be paid for by someone else. So there's sort of this conflict that they understand that elephant health and welfare needs to be improved, but they don't want to have to be the ones responsible for improving it. Because there's so much money being made from elephant tourism in Nepal, it is the second biggest income producer beyond park entry fees. It's probably not going to stop anytime soon. So what we need to do is find some sort of an alternative that considers the needs of the humans involved in tourism, the elephants and all the other species that are living in around this area, such as the wild elephants who are now dying of TB. We need to take a systems approach versus just a single species approach. So we need to stop looking at just humans, just elephants, and really involve all of the stakeholders. Which brings me to the NGOs in the area. There are a lot of NGOs active in Nepal, a lot of international organizations, a lot of local organizations. And the problem that I kept running into is that none of these NGOs are working together because they have such vastly different concepts of what elephant health and welfare means. And very few of them are working with elephant biologists or elephant scientists, any kind of researchers, to decide what elephants need. Rather, they're just going sort of by their own gut instinct, which has proven to be a problem. A lot of them are also taking to social media to vilify owners and mahouts, which is just serving to increase the gap between researchers, NGOs, and owners. So the owners are fighting back against these negative stereotypes. So we also need to find a way to support owners and support everyone involved so that we can keep elephants in Nepal, keep tourists in Nepal, but get these elephants out of these situations and into better situations. Another problem is that there are a lot of NGOs raising money to build shelters, but these NGOs don't actually have land or any sort of connections in Nepal. At this point, there's only really 2 places where elephants are chain-free and or retired in Nepal. So we really need to get these NGOs to function together. So what do we do in the short term? We really need to provide some more free choice for the captive elephants, some chain-free time, more grazing time where they pick what they want to eat. We need to lean toward a semi-wild existence, which has worked both in Africa and Asia for captive elephants. We need to provide longer chains. If elephants remain chained, we need to provide longer chains so that they're able to have some agency in their life. We need to provide leaning walls. We need to provide dirt piles so that there can be lying rest. And we need to provide more social opportunities. I think the only way that this is going to happen is if we also increase pay for mahouts and increase the social standing of mahouts so that they have return to pride in their job and return to being happy in their position and more supported by the community as a whole. And then clearly, we need to better manage habitats, which Nepal has done a really good job of setting aside these protected areas. They're working on wildlife corridors now, which is fantastic. There needs to be more consideration of marginalized humans, the ones that are greatly impacted by human-elephant conflict. There needs to be more transboundary cooperation. So it's really not just one answer, but a sort of a spectrum of choices that we need to make, and we need to support a variety of different attempts to improve elephant lives in Nepal. So that's it. I think I did it in pretty good time. I talked really fast to fit it in there. Somebody stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle. You were at the right pace, so that was perfectly fine. And thank you for highlighting the concerns and challenges in Nepal, especially. So we will move to the next segment. Please just give me 1 minute. So now we have the conversation on how we can improve the health and welfare of captive elephants in tourism and how improving their health impacts wild elephants. Ms. Floriane Blot in conversation with Dr. Michelle. A brief bio of Ms. Floriane. Ms. Floriane Blot's adventure with elephants began during her early days as a zookeeper trainer in France. Floriane did an expedition to India, specifically to the region of Karnataka, to collaborate with a non-governmental organization, an NGO, devoted to elephant conservation and welfare. In 2013, she settled in Chitwan region, Nepal, and co-founded Stand Up for Elephants, a non-profit organization dedicated to the welfare of captive elephants. Through this NGO, Floriane initiated various projects aimed at enhancing the lives of captive elephants in Nepal. These projects included creating enriching environments, advocating for better medical care, and promoting responsible tourism practices that prioritize the well-being of elephants. Over to you, Ms. Floriane.
Hello everybody. So yeah, I'm here for the conversation with Michelle. Thank you, Michelle, for that nice presentation. And yeah, I'm here to answer the questions, but mostly, Michelle, let me know what subject you want to discuss.
Wonderful. Well, the reason I wanted Floriane to join us today is because I talked about the NGOs active in Nepal and how one of the issues is that they either don't have a presence in Nepal, they drop in to raise money and then leave again. Floriane's organization is the only one that is present in Nepal full-time. So they use a little bit different approach to working with owners. So maybe Floriane, you could tell us a little bit to start with, like how you differ, like how are you approaching improving elephant welfare in Nepal?
Okay, thank you. So yeah, my first year in Nepal, I realized that first nothing was done for privately owned elephants. So with my background and my training, I decided to go back there and to try to guide as much as I could. Our goal with the NGO was never to own elephant and to have our own place and things like that. I work since a long time with elephants, and I know how complicated they are and how big of a responsibility it is. So the goal was always the first 5 years to convince owners and locals to do something different for their elephants, not just pointing fingers and telling them you are not doing good, you don't know what you are doing. I'm going to tell you, this was really not the approach. The approach was to explain that compared to other countries, and it was not our ideas also, it's in many other countries in Asia, and Nepal is a little bit late, to do for example, different activity. We created an activity called Elephant Happy Hour, and instead of giving 1 hour ride with the tourists on their back, we would have a group of tourists and they would just observe the elephant. So with the NGO, we will lease the elephant for 1 hour, and instead of giving ride, just free in the jungle, on the edge of the jungle, because in Nepal, not like other countries in Asia, a lot of wildlife, tiger, rhinos, so you have to be safe for the guests. But you can put 4 guests on an elephant, but sometimes we had 20 people. And of course it was like hands off, and was observation, and people, they just see the elephant can do whatever she wanted to do. And then after, it was over. Of course, because I was there since already a few years, I knew which elephant were like good candidate for that, because not all the elephants can do that activity, but it's possible. And after 2 years of doing that activity, we were #1 of what to do in Chitwan. We could show the books to the elephant owners, showing them, look, you can make a lot of money, because actually the owner, who was like partner with us, he was receiving the full amount of money, because that activity was not free, and we would keep only the money to buy permit for the guest in the jungle. We would give everything to the owner. And even with that, they didn't want to change. The explanation was that maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20 years, but now with the local demand for elephant riding, and also from China, for example, they could still make a lot of money, and they don't necessarily want to change. So this was a first thing, but also at the same time, we would try to convince owner to just change one leg of the elephant. But the problem, like Michelle explained very well, is that those roofs, those shelters, they are like so small that those elephants, they must be chained really short, because otherwise they can destroy those really thin poles. So you cannot just unchain the elephant 1 foot. You also need to build a bigger shelter, and like Michelle said, they didn't want to invest more money in their elephants. So except if you pay for everything, we realized quickly after a few years that they don't really want to change for the moment. So we really try to go slow. We are still helping. We now have a sanctuary, whatever you want to call it, but we have a place safe for 2 elephants that are now fully retired. They belong to the NGO, and they were before working in the riding industry. And since we built that place, we managed to convince other owners. For example, one owner, he went chain free. It's working 70% of the time, because if you are not involved to fix the electric fence and stuff like that, sometimes it's broken. But most of the time we help him, so we can fix it. But by building the sanctuary also was also a way for us to fully show that it's possible, because again, during 5 years we tried to convince them by showing videos, and even other big organizations, they managed to convince elephant owner to go to Thailand. They pay for everything. They saw exactly what they could do with their own eyes. But when they came back, they told me, it's not possible in Nepal. And I wanted to show them that with like local materials and not expensive, we can do something for those elephants, because most of them, almost all of the privately owned elephants are females. So it's not like male facility. And since we have the place, they can actually see by themselves. We invite them to come and to see. And if they need help, of course, we don't pay, but we can advise, we can budget, we can help them to do the construction. So that's the approach. between so many other things. But with the locals, and also one important thing, like Michelle said, in Nepal, we never post anything on social media. They know they can trust us because they had issues with other organizations, and it's important to keep a good relationship, not to judge too easily, because the situation is never black or white. So that's basically it.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on too, because there's sort of this perception that this drive to stop writing comes from more Western societies. And one of the things that surprised me when I was in Nepal is that there is a big push among locals, especially young people, to change the writing culture in Nepal. The Nature Guide Association, the agencies there, the tourist agencies, they are the ones that are really driving this impetus to end elephant riding and switch to a more elephant-friendly way of doing things. And so there's sort of this pushback from owners who are saying, no, it's just coming from the West, when in reality, a lot of this push is coming from within the community itself. But one of the problems is that clearly the money is made from Western tourists, and when Western tourists stopped riding elephants, there was a decline in elephant tourism, and the owners were really interested in making changes. But what happened is that now there's a large increase, especially in the Chinese middle class, of tourism in Nepal, and that is a group of people that's very interested in elephant-back safari. So now we're seeing this sort of change. So locals want elephant tourism to drop off, and the new Chinese tourists are pushing for greater elephant tourism. So we're in kind of a weird spot there. So Floriane, maybe you can say, what sort of feedback do you get from locals for your involvement in Nepal?
Yeah, so the locals, for example, Nepali tourists visiting our place, it's really increasing more and more. Especially the ones coming from the capital, from Kathmandu. You have, like you said, it's they are really many of them. They don't want to go and ride elephant, and they specifically look for an alternative, and they find us, and they come and visit our place. We welcome guests every day. It's free. And they find us and they visit. And when you talk to them, they really don't want to do that anymore. And so the local guests, it's this. You also have like a lot of animal welfare organization, Nepali ones, who are really working on that topic too. And for example, when like the past year, let's say, few things happened with the captive elephants in Chitwan, some big mistreatment, and who gave who spread the news on the newspaper, TV, media, and social media was Nepali groups, and even some Nepali guests. Sometimes they go to a hotel, they see the elephant chain behind a hotel, they see mistreatment, and they post on social media. So all of those mistreatments were like under the spotlight thanks to Nepalese NGOs. Regarding some hotels in Soa, because it's really touristic, and you have more than 150 hotels, I think, in that small town. You also have more and more hotels who refuse to promote elephant riding, but also because it's a small community, it's difficult, because let's say a hotel owner, maybe he doesn't have elephant, and maybe he's not a big fan of sending his tourists to do that activity, but maybe his uncle has elephants. So it's still a tight community, but more and more hotels refuse to promote that activity. And also, like you said, the naturalist guides, they also refuse to promote that activity. And sadly, Chitwan, I think, like you said, they are losing a lot of tourists coming from Europe, for example, because I see in many groups that people, they openly boycott Chitwan because they don't want to support elephant back safari.
It's been a problem. Well, and I think that a lot of the, because there is one hotel that has, with the help of an NGO, transferred their elephants to a chain-free facility. Well, two, I guess there's also Tiger Tops, which is, out in Kasara, but it's, those are facilities that cater to Western tourists. And so there is more money coming into those facilities because they do cater to especially European tourists. And so there's also this, this sense that if you want to have a chain-free facility, you have to have an expensive hotel, you have to bring in expensive guests, and it's really out of reach for a lot of small hotel owners.
Yeah.
So can you just mention for a minute, Floriane, why supporting mahouts is important? Because it's something that's really important to me as well. And how does that impact? So a lot of studies have shown that mahout health and welfare impacts elephant health and welfare. I mean, throughout Southeast Asia, the connections have been made. It's important to support mahouts if you want healthy elephants. So what are you guys doing to help support mahouts?
Yeah, so as soon as you start to work with captive elephants in Asia, I think you would be stupid not to take a huge consideration for the mahout, because they are the key, I think, for those elephants. If you don't have any more good mahouts, those elephants, for a lot of them, for me, they are lost, let's say, because good mahouts mean good relationship with the elephant, means maybe more freedom. For example, in our case, our sanctuary is just on the edge of the jungle, but we are still in a really small village. But we need mahouts to bring our elephants into the jungle, and when they arrive in the jungle, they just get down and they let them go and free for like 6 hours. It's like bringing your kids to the playground and you just watch them. And of course, they stay next to them and they watch them. And when it's time to come back, they call them back and they go back to the place and everything is smooth. And if we don't have mahouts, like so many places in Asia, and we are lost with those elephants, because it will be like having some small zoos everywhere in Asia, where when you have mahouts, it's in many times more freedom for the elephants. So one of the things that I've seen in Nepal, especially going to Karnataka in India and seeing like incredible mahouts with so much knowledge and coming from community of mahouts who are like working with elephants since like 2,000 years, 3,000 years, it's nuts. And seeing them, like knowing their elephants perfectly, and especially knowing the jungle also perfectly, like how they are still connected with the jungle and how they know how to, where I was in Karnataka, even the government, they would still let their elephants free with the drag chain, and those mahouts, they were able to track them in the jungle, and I would follow them and they would show me like a small stick broken, and I was like, it's gone that way. I'm like, oh my God, it's crazy. Huh? And going after to Nepal, it was completely different things. In Nepal, what I see is they shouldn't be called mahout, they are just nice guys, for many of them, just riding elephant. And that knowledge is gone. I don't know a lot about government elephant, but I know that issue is also reaching the government mahout. And I think in Nepal, the private mahouts, I know almost all of them, and maybe I would say 2% of them are actually good mahouts, but still they know almost nothing about the jungle. But they are still aware of their elephants and they still know how to read the elephants. And that's really sad, because I think talking to other organizations in Asia, it seems to be a huge problem everywhere. It seems to be faster in Nepal than other countries, maybe because the population of elephants is really small. But and sadly, between Nepalese and Indians, I mean, Nepali Maouts, they don't like Indian Maouts, and Indian Maouts, they don't like Nepali Maouts, because sometimes, for example, one of our guy is from India, but it was really difficult for the team to be able to work together. But now it works. So I think that's really important, because once again, if the Maouts, they are not trained properly, and if they don't have a community of Maut, and if they don't feel proud of their work, especially in Nepal, because they don't pay them a lot, like nothing. Sometimes they don't have even a salary. They just work 2-3 months. They expect a salary, and after 3 months, they see no salaries coming, so they just change job. They are not coming from a Maut family anymore. They are just 15 years old. It's the first time they see an elephant. They do that job because they cannot find another job. A lot of turnover. They live in a horrible place next to their elephants. More like 60% of the time, the conditions are really, really nasty for those guys. They are far from their family. The job is difficult. It's difficult to force a huge animal who is like really often aggressive to the Mauts, because, like you said, because the conditions are horrible, many elephants are aggressive, and the Maut, they still need to control them, and they still need to work. So it's really complicated, and this is really that's why with the NGO we want to expand, of course, and one of the big goals is to have a big community of Mauts, and to try to attract new generation of guys, because we have young guys and older guys where we are. It's good to being able to share the knowledge, but it's really important to take care of them too, because yeah, in our countries, I mean, in Europe, for example, when I talk to people, they're like, oh, Mauts are not good, and they beat the elephant and this and that, but they don't know. They don't know what it is to be a Maut. They don't know how good the relationship can be. But it's really complicated, but it's a really important topic here.
And I think that's one of the reasons that Nepal offers such an interesting, has such interesting potential, because it used to be, even though, you know, it was illegal, there was a lot of trade across the border between India and Nepal of elephants and mahouts. The mahouts were sort of included in the package a lot of times. They were commodified, just like the elephants were. But since the government of Nepal has decided to enforce the trade of elephants, we now have this population that used to change all the time of mahouts and elephants. And now we have a very solid core group of elephants that is now in Nepal, and they'll stay in Nepal. You know, they can't disappear over the border in the middle of the night like they used to do. So we have this opportunity to work with a stable group of mahouts and a stable group of elephants, and do some long-term sort of population studies with both. And so I went out last year and did some work with mahouts to kind of figure out what mahouts want. And what they want for their elephants, and how they see their social standing. And they seem to think that the standing is improving a little bit now, you know, with more stability. But what they would like is, you know, better housing and better access to their family, the ability to not work 17 hours a day, and then, you know, try to see their family. So yeah, I think things are changing, and I think it's a really good opportunity, because it's a small group, to make some positive changes.
Yes, it is, but yeah, it's complicated, because normally the logic is that if you don't have a big group of people who have knowledge, normally their salary should increase normally, because they don't have a lot of mouths left in Nepal, so they should take care of them better than that, because otherwise it's gonna be a nightmare for those elephants. So yeah, and with our NGO, what we do is they have like health insurance, life insurance. We help we pay for the school for their kids, and we try to help them as much as possible. And we also keep helping the mammals in the village by giving good clothes, winter clothes, doing some training when they are interested. We did the training of, we bring a mammoth from government mammoth from India to train them to do natural rope, things that they knew before, because all of the mammoths in Nepal, they were saying, oh yeah, we knew how to do it before, but now we don't do it anymore. And I'm like, you should learn, because those ropes are the best for your elephants. They are not harmful for your elephants. And they are, yeah, but we don't have good salary and we don't want to bother with that because it's a long process. And they say, we just ask our boss to buy a new nylon rope and that's it. So, but if they were really happy to do it. We did 3 days of that and they all went back with their ropes. And but you can see the potential, but we have to work on that. Yeah.
I don't know when you want us to switch to sort of Q&A or.
I think it's a very interesting, engaging discussion going on. I can listen forever. Where I think we could also move to the Q&A if you both are ready. Yeah. So
Sure.
yes, and thank you for this very engaging discussion. I will just get the final segment here. So the final segment of Q&A will be moderated by Sanjay Ajanikar. Sanjay Ajanikar graduated as a BTech in chemical engineering with a specialization in pharmaceuticals, and he has a postgraduate in marketing studies with a specialization. Sorry, he has a postgraduate in management studies with a specialization in marketing. He has worked as a market researcher and loyalty program professional for more than a decade. He quotes, "I'm taking a leap of marketing research, loyalty marketing, and digital media for wildlife conservation." His re-equipped objective is managing wildlife conservation programs using his varied experience and acquired skill sets. Currently, he is associated with Asian Nature Conservation Foundation and Dakshin Foundation for managing research and wildlife conservation programs. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you so much, Chaitanya, Dr. Chaitanya, and very good evening, good morning to Dr. Michelle and Floriane. Give me 1 second, please. Yeah, wonderful. So it's been very interesting to hear both of you, and I just wanted to check with both of you if I'm audible enough so that I can continue.
Yes, Sanjay.
Perfect. So I have just moved from one northeastern Indian state to another, and I'm may not be very close to Nepal, but I'm almost like 700, 800 kilometers far from Nepal. So in an Indian context where I come from, India being huge, I come from western of Indian states, and I'm now moved very closer to the Nepal. So thank you for being here and making this event, I would say, very exciting and full of knowledge. And I would see that for both of you, there's a lot of there could be a lot of challenges, but despite of those challenges, you are being there, working there, and trying to help not only the elephants of Nepal, but also I would say the community which is associated with Nepal, be it Mahout or their respective families or villagers, or for that matter, even government. So I will jump into the questions that we have got from audience. So Sayani Saha, she wants to ask this question to Dr. Michelle. And she's asking if you can explain more about system approach versus a single species. So I did ask Sayani to explain what she meant by system approach. So I'm assuming here, because I haven't heard from her, maybe she's facing some network issue. So I would put it this way, that maybe what she meant by that, managing one single species versus ecosystem, of species. So, would Dr. Michelle like to take this question?
Sure. Well, it sort of started, in all areas of conservation that we were looking at a single species, right? We wanted to save tigers, and we put tigers in a fenced area, and we wanted tigers to become more tigers. Before we realized, we need to look at prey base, we need to look at territory, we need to look at, everything. And so we've moved in conservation into more of a landscape-based approach, right? Where we're looking at all of the animals that live there, we're looking at all of the plants, the ecosystem. What we need to do now is move into including all of the multi-species communities that live there, meaning the not just the humans. We're not just interested in human welfare. We're not just interested in elephant welfare. We're not just interested in them passing each other. We're interested in those interactions. So we have to look at every single species interaction to be able to take this sort of systems thinking approach. We can't limit our looking at one little area. We have to keep expanding our views. So sort of the opposite of what lab science is. Lab science, as you're going closer and closer to look at something, we're expanding further and further out. So of course it makes everything much more complex. But in the case of the elephants, it's about not just looking at the elephant, right? It's about looking at the elephant-mahout relationship. It's about looking at the mahout community relationship. It's about looking at the livestock elephant relationship and how that's impacting now the wildlife. That we're taking this elephant that lives with livestock and we're taking it into an area where wild pachyderms live and how that's impacting the wild pachyderms. So rather than limiting ourselves to, saving the elephant, we have to be saving the community. We have to be conserving everything in that area. So it's really hard to teach, especially, young people, as I'm working with students, that's probably the hardest thing to get them, because they're all save the rhino, put in a fence, and yeah.
Sure. So I think that's very good explanation, I must say, and it leads to a next question, which I'm tempted to ask Dr. Michelle. So when you say this is a system approach, how well or how relevant it is in the context of Nepal when you look at other wildlife as well. So you're looking at elephant and a related community, let's say mahout, villagers, government officials. But when you look at the elephant and other wildlife species in Nepal, is there a scope for a system approach to be applied in Nepal?
Say that last sentence again?
You want me to repeat my question?
Just the last sentence.
Yeah. So do you think, considering elephant as well as other wildlife species, will the system approach work in Nepal? Is this relevant in Nepal?
I think it's the only thing that's going to work in Nepal, because I think that the government has done a really good job of setting aside land and focusing on wildlife conservation, right? But in the process of doing that, we ended up with this park people conflict, moving villagers out of the protected areas onto the edges where they face more conflict and more poverty. I think that the government is now realizing they have to expand their view. But the problem is that a lot of this funding comes from outside agencies, and outside agencies are interested in species conservation. So, USAID is funding rhino and elephant research. They're not funding rhino and elephant villager research. And so I think that Nepal is a perfect place for this sort of systems approach, just because it is a limited area. It's a government that's already committed to conservation, but it's also a government that's facing a lot of challenges. And so, yeah, until we can get this sort of conservation biology approach, which brings in all the social science, all the biology, all the, that we're not going to make a lot of progress. So, but I think Nepal is the perfect situation for this kind of approach.
Excellent, excellent. So I think that's I just would like to underline what you have said, and then we can move forward, because the whole objective of having these outreach events is, and especially Friends of Elephant believes that every individual who joins and every individual who watches them on YouTube should get empowered with the kind of discussions we are having. And one very interesting thing you said, Dr. Michelle, is about not only educating government officials, people from Nepal, but also there's a good scope of educating funders who are sitting out there in Europe and Americas of the world, and letting them know that it's not only one-horn rhino, it's not only tiger, it's not only elephant, who are absolutely charismatic species, but it's about the entire ecosystem. So I would like to underline that what you said is, giving that information to all the audience who are present on the online today. Moving on to the next question, which is coming from Mr. Baiju Krishnan, and I would like to welcome Mr. Baiju Krishnan. So just for everybody, so he is a part of a system of government of India, and I would welcome him on the event. So he asked, are the research findings highlighted to influence policymakers to frame legislations for the welfare of captive elephants, like captive elephant management foods? So are the research findings used in Nepal to do something like this? And would you, both of you would like to, answer that?
And that's a tough one, because the government is involved in conservation, but the government is not non-corrupt, right? So there's a lot of money involved in conservation. And so there's a lot of interest in keeping things the way they are, right? That's part of the problem. Another part of the problem is that when these recommendations are made, they don't get to where they need to go, right? They don't get pushed up the chain of command. I did hear that there is a elephant care manual being created in Nepal, which is fantastic. But what tends to happen is that everything stalls. So you can share your findings and it gets stuck, which is one of the reasons that I wrote the book. I have a book coming out in the fall or the winter, highlighting all this. So I'm hoping that having that in writing will help. But another problem is that a lot of officials don't access the information that's available. There's a wealth of information on nutrition and housing available online very easily, and the choice is made not to access that information, just to keep the status quo going the way it's going. So there's a lot of problems with communication, and and I'm sure Floriane can probably touch on that even more, because she's there on the ground all the time, so she's daily facing this issue.
Yes. I agree 100% with Michelle, and the daily struggle, for example, it's not only Nepal. I think any government is slow by nature, but it's true that even when, like Michelle was talking about it in the presentation, the lab work, the research work, it's really challenging for us to have access to, even to do a blood test on our elephants. We can take blood, they are trained to do it without any force, and we cannot have the blood analyzed. And if we are facing, for example, almost daily, our elephants, when they go in the jungle, they play and they break a small tree, for example, and then the local authorities of that community forest, they tell us that it's not good that elephants, they are breaking trees. Even if we pay more than 2 lakh permit every year, they are still complaining. And I try to explain that elephants are like the gardener of the forest, and that forest will be more healthy with elephants inside, and it's helping all the other species. And so it's daily like that. And with captive elephants, it's the same. We are starting, like, the bar is really low, so of course it's almost like you can only have improvement. But it seems like when those guidelines they come out, it's more like an advice, and then after they follow it or they don't follow it, it's their choice. It's a privately owned animal, so it's like forcing someone with a dog to do something with his dog. So that's why the rule needs to change. They must recognize those elephants as wild animals, because that's what they are. They are just captive wild animals. There is no such thing as domesticated elephants. So if someone in Nepal had a rhino in the backyard, they would be nuts, you know. But they have elephants, and things should move a little bit faster.
But I must say that you brought a nice perspective, Florian. You talked about not just Nepal but government across any country, and I'm sure it changes by developed and developing countries, and because their priorities are different, they want to focus on few things they don't want to deliberately focus on. So you give a nice perspective about being slow is a commonality when it comes to wide network. Okay. Okay. I think we got into some dramatic effect. Okay, nonetheless. So I'm sorry for the distraction. So that perspective is very interesting about the slow response from the government, and that's very interesting. And despite of that, you guys are going ahead and doing work, which is very, very commendable. So I'll jump to another question by Annette Hathaway. And the question is to both Florian as well as Dr. Michelle. So it's a long one, but I would like to ask it precisely, where she asked, has anyone explored offering mahouts, both private as well as government, the opportunity to read and write in their native language, which is local language? Because what she experienced is mahouts from Chitwan, they don't know how to read and write. So also what happens is, many of them could be, addicted to alcohol, they get bored, and basically there is no learning, might be, there's no open-mindedness. So she's asking this question to both of you, that has this area been explored to teach them to read and write in native language?
Well, yes, yes and no. You have to remember that some of these elephant caregivers are working 17 hours a day, right? So their free time is not usually spent in academic pursuits, right? So I think a lot of the focus, and I think Florian can address this better probably, is on educating the mahouts children who don't have the opportunity. I mean, a lot of mahouts became mahouts because they have no education, they don't have any other opportunity. So we're trying to educate the children instead. So Florian, do you want to?
Yeah. No, that's a good question, of course, because being a part of like that kind of community with not a lot of education, of course, she's right. Many of them, they don't know how to write, they don't know how to count. But like Michelle said, it's good to focus on their children, but it's also good to we guide them. For example, many mahouts in town, they come to us because they just made a loan and they don't understand interest rate and things like that. So we just explain to them. The thing is, like, it's good if they have someone that they trust to help them if they have issues with their bank or with this or with that. So that's why it's good to have I tried to convince the mahouts at some point to do a union, but it was quickly stopped. It was many years ago. But if they can have groups and like they can trust, and this can help. But yes, of course, they need help, those mahouts, and they need more help. Yeah.
So that's wonderful. That's wonderful take. And I think just to add one more thing that Annette might be wanted to bring it to focus is about setting a boredom. Because reading and writing could take away the space. Also, all the instructions which are given by doctors or somebody who have trained them what to do, taking that knowledge forward, the essential part is reading and writing. But reading and writing is not possible, then I think you have really suggested a good solution, Florian, where you are asking about the, the groups, they can teach each another, because every time it's not possible resources and otherwise to have somebody coming and training all the time. So, it's like a buddy programs, and that could be helpful, I guess. So
I think there's a trickle up effect too, as we're making sure that children are getting educated, that education is getting taken home and passed on to the parents as well.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. I used to go after my science class and I used to, tell my granny what to do and what not to do. And I used to get another perspective from her, because I used to feel that she's illiterate and she might not know, but she definitely knew more than my teachers. So I totally agree with you. So I jump to the next question, where Chaitanya is asking Dr. Chaitanya. She says that this is not only a problem in Nepal, but it is a big concern in India too. So well, you talked about it, but she still want to underline and ask that what can be done to preserve the ancient Mahout knowledge?
I think part of it is identifying those Mahouts that have been doing this a long time and listening to their stories. I mean, I think Mahouts have been neglected and pushed aside to the point where nobody is listening to them and nobody's making, not even bothering to learn their names. So identifying, making these relationships. And then like Florian said, they brought in a Mahout from India, right? And passed that traditional knowledge along to make sure that it's getting passed down. But I think if we could get a lot of it written down, and I think the Elephant Care Manual will help with that. I think that's key.
Yeah, I think you need something alive, and the book is a great idea, but I think you must keep that community alive and well, because once again, all of that knowledge, they used to have it. And sometimes they come and they're like, oh, you crazy white people, you want to put back the elephants in the jungle. And I'm like, yeah, but guys, you used to do that. I learned that in India. I didn't learn that in France, giving free time to your elephants and being able to bring them back. And it's what you should do and what you used to do. And like keeping the job of Mahout alive and interesting for the new generation also, because the new generation also, they don't want to do it. But still, even if it's not a family thing now, but maybe some person, they want to become a Mahout, but they don't know it. Maybe half of the Mahouts that I know, they just started because they were close to a stable and they start to hang out there when they were a teenager. And so, but it's really, really, really important, because it's the key for those animals. And I think the NGOs, they don't talk enough about the Mahout, and they don't see, especially NGOs coming from the US or Europe, they don't understand it, and they are quickly to judge. And they also, other NGOs working with elephants, almost all the sanctuary, whatever you want to call it, if they don't have Mahouts, they cannot exist, Otherwise, they just have some small enclosures with an elephant, like in a not really nice zoo in Europe, So it's really important to take care of them.
We need to elevate their status again in society. We need to get off of that social support, because it used to be being a Mahout could get you standing with the monarchy, and it could get you, wealth and help on your farm. And now it's not. It's so frowned upon as a, low caste, uneducated. So we need to, support those Mahouts and get them seen better in society. And that'll really help improve people wanting to be Mahouts.
Sure. Definitely. So just to take the discussion to the next level, the set of volunteers that we have who work with us to organize this event, and we also had a couple of discussions with the today's speakers. So we set of volunteers, we have listed down few questions. So the first question is very relevant to what we are just now talking. So I noticed that Dr. Michel's presentation had this corrected number of wild elephants estimated to be in Nepal, which could see a drastic increase. So we would like to check that, well, there are captive elephants for tourism purposes, but what about the elephants which could have been wandered off or left by herd, or let's say injured? So does Nepal have those captive elephants which are operated by government?
Do they have government? You mean government working elephants? Yes,
The government elephant camps for the elephants which are orphaned, which are injured, which are wandered off or left by the herd.
Oh, you mean, no, I mean, not that I know of. Floriane, have you ever heard of a injured wild elephant or an orphaned wild elephant coming into a captive stable?
You mean after it becomes captive elephants, or just visiting?
No, it's what I meant is the injured wild elephants or orphaned wild elephants, or the elephants which are wandered off or lost their way, not able to reach the herd, because the number of wild elephants seems to have increased. So are such kind of problems that are faced by government of Nepal with respect to any such cases of wild elephants?
Yeah, I've heard of last year at the border with the Nepal and Uttar Pradesh was they found a baby elephant and an orphan, and then they gave it to the Indian authorities at the border. I don't know what happened with that baby. Also in West Nepal, 2 females were kind of lost. They don't know where they came from, like 2 wild females, but they were like stressed in the village. But otherwise, yeah, injured elephants. Sometimes one of the male coming in like close to all of the stables, he was injured, but it's at that time that he started to attack human. But otherwise, not so much.
All right.
There isn't a family herd that lives very close. So if you want to see the family herd, you need to hike in about a day or more into Chitwan. So the only elephants, the wild elephants that are close to the edges are those bachelor males. Yeah, rather than family herds.
All right. So I would like to ask Dr. Michel, like, is there a possibility, because there's an increase in wild elephants, so there'll be increase of such incidents of wandering off, losing from the herd, or being orphaned or injured?
I would guess probably so. And I think we're also going to see more increases. I mean, it used to be there was 1 wild bull who was active in the area. And then there were 2, and now there's 3. And so I think as more and more of these bachelor elephants are coming in too, we're going to see more and more fighting. And I just don't think that there's a place at the moment to facilitate any sort of rehabilitation of those elephants, because it hasn't been an issue in the past. I just don't think that there's any sort of a setup in place. As for like the orphaned, or injured females or babies, they just aren't close enough to the area Chitwan to be a problem. They're on other ends of the country.
So the next question that we have, maybe Floriane could answer, or both of you can answer, is that wherever there are these elephant tours are planned, like elephant back safari. So are there incidences of a rub-off effect between wild and captive elephants, the safari elephants?
Yeah. You have many incidents. Of course, they don't talk about it. Sometimes it's minor. Let's say they do an activity and the elephants start to act, and the tourists, they fall or whatever, this kind of stuff. But nothing bad really happens. Sometimes, I mean, it's maybe a little injury, but not so much. And with the wild bulls, Yeah. Lately, last winter, one of the 3 wild bull, he was acting a lot. He's really young and he starts to, like, I don't know, he's just being a bull. Yeah, he was visiting a lot of places, even the places where they start elephant safari. So modes, they had to just run away and leave their elephant. Yeah, it causes issues, but you can also see that those bulls, they, especially the last one, the younger one, is kind of lonely, you know, and he sees females and he goes, and some females, they really like him, so he goes again and visit the same places, and not to mate, just to have company. That's one of the thing that we must, that's why also that group is really important, like any kind of honest group talking about elephants, is that elephants, I think we don't know a lot about Asian elephants, mostly because it's difficult for researchers to study them. It's easier to stay in a jeep, I think, and being in Africa and look from the jeep and take notes, because in Asia, you have to actually go in the jungle. And because of human-elephant conflict, those elephants are really aggressive to human in many places. So, but yeah, I mean, those bulls, we don't know a lot about elephants and the bulls, and you start to see studies now that says that maybe bulls are not so like solitary anymore. That's good, because when you are like working with the elephants, you see those behaviors, and so yeah, not so much, because there are not a lot. We are only talking about 3 elephants, 3 bulls. So
And there have been tourists and and mahouts killed by the wild elephants too, because the wild elephants are so used to walking through those areas, and they approach the the patrol elephant stables and fight with the government males. So I think the most recent death was an Israeli student doctor who was walking behind kind of the government stable area and was killed by the wild elephant. And yeah, so it gets dangerous as the wild elephants are more accustomed to seeking captive company.
Right. More biology and more scope for psychographic studies, I guess. So moving on to the next question. So, there's one interesting thing that Floriane has talked about, about social media, and not being so active there because we don't want unnecessary attention. And I would say that it comes with a lot of experience and wisdom. So I would like to ask this to Floriane, that have you thought about how to create that right media plan? Because there are a lot of opportunities, and I'm sure anybody will get tempted to get into social media, planning. Having said that, because it's a small country, there's, as Dr. Michel has rightly pointed, that most of the funds comes from outside, and unless the funders are known about what is happening, they may not be able to contribute effectively. So have you thought of creating that right media plan or right media mix, where you also take care of the sensitive issues, the negativity, the negative rub-off effect? So have you given a thought about it? And if yes, we would like to know about it as an audience.
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's, again, a question that really shows that we must all work together in an honest way and understand each and everybody's point of view, because otherwise those elephants, captive or wild, I think they are lost. Because again, with the social media, it's a great tool. Social media is a great tool, and now you must have social media. I take care of the NGO social media, and it's difficult because, of course, sometimes you see horrible things. You have horrible elephant owners, but like you have horrible carpenters, it's not because they own an elephant that they are bad. You just have bad French people and bad Nepali people. It's just how the world is. And sometimes you see a horrible thing and you would like to say something about it, using social media to tell the world that this is happening and this was horrible. And but you have to, I think everybody must understand their roles. The like the researchers to do the research and to try to do the research by focusing not on their ego or whatever, but focusing on how to help whatever they need to help, whatever species they need to help. And and scientists and NGO and government officials, and because that's how it can only work. And for example, it took us years to have a good and honest relationship with animal activists. I don't consider myself as an animal activist, but I think if you want to protect something, you need all of those different parties, you know. You need the animal activists to be here and to say something without risking anything, and to say, look, even if sometimes it's too much and it's this and that, but it's their role in a way, you know. And sometimes things only change when you put a big spotlight, and even if you, let's say, squeeze a bit the reality, if it can help the big public to understand. I don't do that, but I understand the need for that. But you also need people like the NGO that we have to be on the ground and to be able to have a good communication with elephant owners, with authorities, with, because if they stop communicating with us, if they don't let me go to the stable to go see their elephants, it's even worse for those elephants if they are completely locked and hidden from everybody. So it's important, I think, because all of those groups, they keep, personally, they keep the other groups in check, you know, like that. Okay, it's not because you are the government that you can do that, you know, this was wrong. Or it's not because you are an NGO that you could do that, this was not okay to do. So I think, once again, elephant, wild and captive, it's so that species, it's so complicated that we need everybody to work together and to be able to talk about those things honestly.
I think that's a very good note to end the Q&A session, I guess, working holistically, putting our differences aside and focusing on the work and focusing on the individual perspective that every group of stakeholders should have and must have, and looking at it very positively and assertively, which Floriane and Dr. Michel, both of them are doing. And I must appreciate the kind of work you guys are doing. And thank you so much, because both of you and the kind of inputs and the discussion you had, we have understood Nepal in a better and a different way. And also there are a few things which got underlined, like it's not just elephants, but it's Mahout, it's community, and the knowledge about Mahout. I recently attended one of the meetings for the fundraising where the big, huge corporate group was involved, and one of the area that came out where the elephant experts were talking exactly same thing about knowledge of Mahout, because and very rightly put by Dr. Michel that in near future they're going to be captive elephants, they're going to be wild elephants, and if as one of the sources that Dr. Michel has quoted, that wild elephants are on the rise, that means the problems in the forest will be on the rise, and government would require wild elephants help in patrolling and several operations. And then having this knowledge of ancient knowledge of Mahout makes a lot of difference, and the expert from India, we're quoting that we may need to start institutes which have a course for Mahouts, and that could also elevate their stature in the society, which Dr. Michel and Floriane, you guys have been highlighting that, it's very important for them to have that social stature in the society. And if that is binded with academic need for the courses for Mahout, I think that could really help in countries like Nepal and India and wherever the wild elephants are more. And using wild elephants is kind of inevitable. You know, the kind of landscape, you can't go everywhere on foot or through vehicle because you don't have roads. So, you know, I would really like to end the Q&A session with that note that we should all put together, you know, our hands and keep our differences aside and work towards conserving elephants in the community. Thank you so much, Dr. Michelle and Floriane, and Dr. Chaitanya, over to you.
Thank you, Sanjay. You summed up everything so succinctly. And big thank you to Dr. Michelle and Ms. Floriane. Wonderful presentation. I'm sitting with so much to ponder upon, and I'm sure that everyone here goes back with what can we do? What really stands out, and I think to sum it in one line would be, you know, we need an integrated approach along with empathy and, you know, having balance. And I think this goes not just to elephants in Nepal, but it's very close. We are facing something similar in India as well. And including the whole team, right, of the elephant, the caretaker, the Mahout, and the management. That's vital. That's something Dr. Surendra Verma always says. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Sanjay, for the Q&A. Big thank you to all the participants for all the engaging questions. You can also find the recording on the YouTube channel, and we look forward to many more. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.